All right. Well, we're in session 8, and I've already gotten conversations from wives. I don't solicit it, I don't ask. I've already had several come up to me and talk about this session for the Wednesday night group. Like, I don't know what you're doing with my husband, but keep it up. Those kind of things. This is a great lesson because we're talking about women, understanding God's woman. And speaking of that, I've shared this before, but there was this time this guy was walking on a beach in California. And as he was walking along, he sees a lamp washed up on the beach. He's heard the story, so he decides to pick up the lamp, rubs on it for a second, and out pops a genie. He's like, this is so cool. Now, don't take theological implications for this. This is just a story for effect, okay? Don't burn me at the stake for this. But anyway, the genie pops out, and he says, is this for real? Do I get 3 wishes? He's like, sure thing. What's your first wish? Guy said, I want to have money in my pockets at all times. He says, your wish is my command. It's been granted. He starts pulling out $100 bills out of his pocket, all the money that he wants. He's like, awesome. He said, okay, what's your second wish? And the guy thought for a second. He said, I want to always be in shape. And he said, the guy said, genie said, your wish is granted. Immediately, he felt stronger, felt better in shape. And he said, okay, what's your third wish? And he said, he thought about that one for a little bit. And he said, I'd like to understand the mind of a woman. Oh, I messed up the joke. Shoot. He actually said, I'd like to have a highway built to Hawaii because he was scared of heights. And he didn't want to have to fly. So the genie was like, come on now. Do you realize how much that affects the rest of the world? And think about bridges because ships pass through there. He says, come up with another wish. And the guy said, I'd like to understand the mind of a woman. And the genie says, do you want that highway to be 2 lanes or 4 lanes? So I totally messed that one up. I didn't prepare. I've worked on the content today, and I thought, I remember this joke. And I'm really not the guy that always messes up jokes. That's killing me right now. And so out of that, understanding a woman, like we think we know, and sometimes we don't. You know, I remember when my wife, I'd ask her if she's okay, and she'd say she's fine, and I believed her. Like that fine meant fine. If you still believe that, your wife is not fine when she says fine. You know, those kind of things. We got to understand it. And so we're going to get into that today, but let's just do a quick recap from session in the past, our definitions, the 4 life-giving responsibilities of manhood, page 65. The first one, we courageously follow God's word. That's what we looked at in session 7. This is our North Star. This is what guides us. This is what leads to life. Then to the left and right of us, a man loves and protects God's woman. That's what we're looking at today. And then also excels at God's work. That's the other part of that. And we get to look at that next week. And that's the second best. Out of all these, like when we understand our work and understand our wife, these things really come into place in powerful ways. These are the 2 most impactful I've seen in many marriages, including myself, through this. And then finally, the man betters God's world. And that's session 10. So we're getting close to the end of this. But today we want to talk about winning with your wife. Like I have seen people and I've known people that were successful in business. They were successful financially, but the home piece wasn't. And they've said time and again, I would trade everything just to have that piece. It robs them of satisfaction. It robs them of joy because it doesn't matter how much money you make if you go home to a miserable house because they're miserable or you're both miserable together. It's not rewarding. And so we want to understand how to win. And now I'll go ahead and tell you, there's no silver bullet, okay? There's no magic formula that works for everyone or anything like that, but there is a formula that there is a way that we can work with our wife, understand her. Every woman is different. And some of you are going to say to yourself through parts of this, my wife's not like that. And that's okay. This is not, every woman is exactly the same, just like all guys are different. God's put you together for a reason, but you need to understand your wife. And that's what we're trying to get to is a better understanding. And so the first thing we're going to see is a husband scale. Now on this husband scale, you've got 2 parts to it. On the far left side, you've got the lost husband. And then on the far right, you've got the life-giving husband. And so when you look at these 2, the lost husband, he thinks he knows women and guesses about how to live with his wife. That's the guy that's like, oh, I understand women. I've heard people say, you know, I've dated lots of women. I know how this works. And it's like dating is different than marriage. Dating is teaching you how to get ready for divorce almost, not really marriage, because you go out with somebody and when things get tough, you break up. You have disagreements, you break up and over and over and over. That's not the long-term sustained aspect. But there's guys that think they know. I know how women tick. I know how women I know how marriage is. And the ones that know the most are usually like the newlyweds. Like, have you ever noticed that, the guy that has, the marriage that they haven't gone through half of this, but they think, yeah, I know all about marriage. Ours is great. Y'all should follow our example. How long you been married? 3 weeks, those kind of things. But there was this one pastor, he was talking about, they were in a men's round table, and it was the week before Valentine's Day. And they were going around the table saying, so what are you going to do for Valentine's Day? And this one young guy who'd been coming to the group, but he's real condescending, kind of a know-it-all. He was like, look, it's a little different for us. I understand my wife. She's very practical, and we've talked about it, and we've agreed not to do anything for each other for Valentine's Day. And this pastor was like, you realize that didn't mean you, right? And he's like, no, you don't understand. He was very condescending, he said. He was just like, but he's like, no, I understand. We're in agreement. And so we're just going to save money this year, not do anything. And so the next week rolled around, and he couldn't wait. He was like, just couldn't wait. I got to that guy and was like, so how did Valentine's Day go? And he's like, man, women are strange. Like, I don't understand. We were sitting there eating dinner, and then she ran into the bedroom, locked the door, and cried for a few hours. And when I finally got her to talk to me, she told me she was upset because I didn't get her anything for Valentine's. And I told her, I said, but we agreed not to get anything. She said, yeah, but I thought you were going to surprise me. And it's like those kind of, if you can ever get to the point where you realize you don't know what you don't know, that's where you get to that second part, the life-giving husband. Because Proverbs says there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end is death. And that's talking about just life in general, but that can speak to us as well. We try to guess at it, whereas the life-giving husband understands he doesn't know women. And that awareness motivates him to seek out wisdom and practical help to live well with his wife. This happens in seasons too. You might be really good in the newlywed phase, but like she's different once she has a child. There's a better you got to understand your wife differently at that point. Like roles change, emotions change. When they're a mother or a grandmother, those are different areas of life. And so you got to be continually learning and understanding your wife in order to get those places. So you need those practical helps because they face different things. They change over time just like we do. And so you get to page 66, it says, 1 Peter 3:7. This is a powerful passage. It says, husbands, live with your wives according to knowledge, since she is a woman. It's not a put down that she's a woman, okay? What he's trying to help them understand, another translation says, live with your wife in an understanding way. This is one of those moments that just blew up in my face, like in a good way, when I'm going through men's fraternity. Live with your wives in an understanding way, or according to knowledge. That means you've acquired the biblical knowledge that leads to understanding. It's one thing to know what you should do. We all know we should love our wife, but understanding when we need to love our wife and how to love our wife, those are two different things through this. And so there's a big difference, it says, between really living and just existing. Existing operates on guesswork and instinct. Really living, on the other hand, comes through the exercise of certain learned skills that you've acquired and honed. That's from Dr. Phil, of all places. But we have skills to understand and learn from this. And it's interesting when you understand a woman. It turns out from the left and right brain, they have more connections than we do. That means they tend to multitask more. And so they compare women to radar and men as lasers. Okay? That allows us to focus on a task. There's times when your wife's like, what are you thinking about? And you say, nothing. And she's like, I wonder what he's thinking about. And we're really thinking about nothing. We can turn it off and turn it on, but a woman, everything is connected. And not to be too, it's going to be on YouTube. We'll see how it goes. But even during sex, for a guy's like, we turn on the laser focus. Like, it's time for sex. Okay, we're focused on that. Right in the middle of making out, your wife will be like, oh, so-and-so had a bad grade today at school. You're like, I don't care if they flunk out of school right now. Like, I'm here for one thing and one thing only. But their mind, it's a culmination. Even the act of sex is building off the entire day, whereas we can turn off, I don't care how bad a day you had. It's time to go into laser focus. Our wives are different. And so that's why they talk about women are spaghetti, men are waffles. Waffles are little squares in them, and we can compartmentalize. And we can shift from one task to another. It allows us to really get focused. For our wives, those spaghettis all mixed together. And like, that's their life. And if they've had a weird day, it's really hard for them to be present in the moment for things like sex. So these are the things we're going to understand about this. But somewhere on this husband scale is you. Let's see if I can get that to work. So I want you to take just a second, mark on that thing, from the lost husband, totally lost, but thinks you know what you're doing, to the guy that understands, I don't know what I don't know. Maybe take a second, just kind of mark, where do you think you're at on that scale? And so I've got some things, this is just kind of added stuff in here, but talking about living with your wife according to knowledge, like always be curious, always be learning more about your wife. You might ask her a question like, tell me something that I don't know about you. And you might have been married for 30 years. That's okay. You probably forgot what she's about to tell you. Like, we're like Groundhog's Day. You know, it starts over. My wife tells me the same stuff all the time. And it's like, wow, that's a cool story. It's like I've never heard it before. But to stay enchanted by her, to engage with her, you know, let her be the focus. That's what we're talking about in this, is understanding your wife in the midst of that. Okay, so now let's move into what your wife needs most. This is where we're going to get, I mean, there is just handfuls of stuff that they've given us, and I've got a few other things to put in here. But what your wife needs, this is not natural, guys, but she needs to feel your heart. That doesn't even make sense to us. Like, what do you mean she needs to feel your heart? And so what we're going to see is he's breaking this down from Ephesians 5, 25 through 29. He mentions verse 25, husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church. That's a picture of sacrifice. He loved the church so much that he gave his life for her. This is not going to be natural for us, but part of dying to ourselves and living for Christ and loving our wife means we've got to step up in these areas. And so these are the things, like, I don't understand this, but it's not as hard as it might seem once we have a plan. So priority number one for every husband is to make sure his wife feels loved. That's the key word, feels. It doesn't matter how much she knows the truth. If she feels different, that's the reality. For many women, feelings will override everything she sees in front of her. You've been a great husband all week, but she had this weird dream, and she's mad at you because of a dream. You know, you're apologizing for things you didn't even do. That's because she's feeling that right now, not because it's logical. Again, understanding your wife, an understanding way. And so finding ways to re-engage, reassure, this is what this second page is going to help us to do. But social research, the note says, has confirmed that emotional engagement with her husband is by far and away the single most important factor in a woman's happiness in marriage. Emotionally engaged with you. And it's funny because, like, I think it was from the Screw Tape Letters from C.S. Lewis, where he mentions this throwaway sentence where it talks about men are just trying not to cause trouble, and women are wanting to connect at that point. So here's what I'm trying to say about that he didn't mention it this way, but like, when you come home from work, you've had a long day or whatever, you just don't want to cause trouble, right? You're like, I'm just going to go sit in the corner, might grab my phone, I'm going to chill out for a minute, and your wife is wanting to connect with you, and you're like, look, I didn't cause any problems. I'm good, right? No, she's wanting to connect with you, and that's what that next step is. It's a call to emotionally connect with your wife. I mean, it's about sharing how your day went. When was the last time you shared how your day went with your wife? You're like, can I do that? Am I supposed to? You know, those kind of questions come out sometimes, but a woman wants to hear how your day went, how you felt, not just what got accomplished, but to connect with you through that. And she wants to be read into her heart, so to speak. Like, she wants to understand what's going on, and there's power in vulnerability. There's power in sharing when you had a rough day. And you take on what's bothering her. You meet her where she's at. And so here's some of the secret sauce is like, just ask her things like, what was the best part of your day? And then listen. What made you sad today? And it's really important right here. I mean, this is where phone's down, you're talking to her, you read your checklist, I need to ask her how she's doing today. Okay, you put your phone away, you ask her the question, but what was something that made you sad today? Don't trivialize whatever she said. It might be like, well, the dog bumped its toe. Oh, you think that's bad? You should have seen what happened at work. You know, that's not the time to do that. You're trying to connect with her. You're trying to empathize with her, and you're not trying to fix it, okay? That's one of the big problems, helping a lot of men in marriage, because I didn't know this for a long time. My wife would come in complaining about work, and I'm like, here's what you should do, X, Y, Z. She does not care about my advice. She just wants to talk. And I've learned that there's times where I'm like, do you want me to give advice? You just need me to listen. And now we can have that conversation because 25 years later, we've worked through that to where we understand. And I still go into fix-it mode sometimes. Don't fix her. Just listen to her. So here's some things that we're going to see out of this. Regularly reassure your wife. Here's how to emotionally connect with your wife. And you might make a checklist out of this, okay? Like literally, if you just make a checklist of some of these things to do, it will change your marriage if you do them. And I'm not guaranteeing it, but I'm almost guaranteeing it. Like I have watched men do some of these things. Already I'm having conversations with ladies in the church. I did not ask them. They have reached out to me since Wednesday. What are you talking with my husband about? He's like a different man. He's done two things. Because I'm in group with one of the guys. I know exactly what he did, and it wasn't rocket science, but his wife is like, oh, what is this? You know, that's what I'm saying out of this. It's the little things, and we'll get to some good news and bad news about that in a minute, but let's see some ways to reassure her. With words of affection, you can never say, I love you enough. You might say, well, I grew up in a house that didn't say it. Well, that was wrong. And we've talked about some of the wounds that we've had from not being able to express our feelings and holding those things down. And so you can change that, you know? You can't say it enough to your kids. Those are the kind of things. With words of praise, things like, you're the best. You look beautiful. You are my best friend. You make life fun. You bring so much joy to my life. And here's the thing. You're the best might be a great phrase, but if it's your only phrase, it gets old. You know, we keep saying the same thing. Some guys say, you know, they say the same thing every time, and they say, well, we've just become comfortable. That's not exactly comfortable. That's phoning it in. That's not winning it with your wife. You're just coming up with creative ways to tell her you love her, you're my best friend, those kind of things, because that's what she needs. And remember, this is about what she needs, not what we want to do. This is about, like, do we want to engage with our wife? Then we're going to do some things that are probably outside our comfort zone, but it will change our wife for the better in a good way. Statements of commitment. I'll always be there for you. I'm yours forever. Those kind of things. Those are powerful that we can do with our wife. So the next part of this is pursue your wife. Some guy's like, I don't even know how to pursue my wife. But at one point you did, because you were in a dating relationship. You took her out to eat. You surprised her at times, you know, those kind of things. And now that we've got her on the hook, it's kind of like, she's not going to divorce me. She's not going to leave me. And so we just kind of forget to pursue our wife, but she needs to be pursued. And so here's some things it says. Leave a note on the bathroom mirror asking her out on a dinner date. That one is amazing. Stick it on her mirror. If you need sticky notes, I'll get you a sticky note, okay? Or find hers, you know, those kind of things. But if you need a sticky note, just stick it on her mirror one day and let her see that and feel loved as a result of that. Some of you put on your bathroom mirror the definition of manhood, and you've had conversations just from that with your spouse, because those are things that they're noticing about that. Delight her with a thoughtful gift not connected to a special occasion. So sometimes you just give her a note just because. Call her in the middle of the day just to say, I've been thinking about you today. First time you do that, she's gonna like, what do you need? You know, so what's wrong? And she's gonna have to learn to feel that as he really just wants to see me. He just wants to tell me he loves me. It says, in a quiet moment, ask her, how can I love you better? And then act on her answer. You know, that's one of the best. How can I show you love? That's one of the biggest things I do in premarital counseling. How could your spouse show you feel loved today, this week? And they tell the spouse, and then it's their job to figure out how to act on those things. There was one up at the top. I meant to mention it, and then I left it out. But with warm hugs and tender touches that don't always lead to sex. Like, you go up and give her a big hug. She's like, I know where this is going. You know, you give her a big kiss at night. She's like, I know where this is going. This is about, instead of where she thinks it's going, you give her a big kiss at night, and then you roll over and go to sleep. She's not used to that. And, you know, it's one of those things where it's telling her, hey, he doesn't just want sex with me. He actually loves me. He tells me he loves me and then rolls over. Now, I'll tell you this, when your wife feels emotionally connected to you, she is more attracted and wants to have more sex with you, okay? So that's not why you do it, but you will find you don't get the pity sex routine. You actually have emotional connectedness with your wife. When she feels loved and her love tank is full, we'll talk about that in a minute, it comes out more naturally. Okay, that's what that's why they say, people talk about, it was like foreplay starts in the kitchen for men, and usually with like washing the dishes and helping get dinner finished after the kids eat. that's where your wife starts to feel connected to you. That leads to other things. So write a personal note of why you love her on her birthday or anniversary rather than buying the usual stock card. But I underlined a few of those key words to show I really read the letter that I gave it to her. I've been guilty of that. I'm not going to sit here and some of you are smiling too big. You've done it too, where you're like, man, I should have done that. But like handwritten notes. Surprise her with an overnight weekend getaway just for fun and relaxation. Okay, so I've got some good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? Good news or bad news? Yes. Which one do you want me to start with? The good news. Okay, here's the good news. When you put that note on the bathroom mirror telling her you love her, you get 1 chip. That's awesome. You get 1 chip. You take her out on a date, just regular old date, go out somewhere, you get 1 chip. You try to make up for having missed her birthday or missing date nights for a few months. You're like, I'm going to buy her an all expenses paid trip to Maui. And you take her on this vacation, you get 1 chip. That's the bad news. Okay, that's the good news is you get 1 chip for some very simple things. It doesn't cost a lot to get the chip. The bad news is we think I'll just make up for it, and our wives don't carry the same currency as us, and it's 1 chip at a time. Washing the dishes could be a chip. Vacuuming could be a chip. Little things like that. It doesn't have to cost as much as a trip to Maui. So there's your bad news and your good news. So the bad news is we can't make up for lost chips. The good news is there's some simple ways to cash them in and actually start to see that work in your wife's life. So next up, speak your wife's love language. This is page 68. When you're looking at that, you see these 5 different love languages. This is from Gary Chapman, the 5 love languages. If you need more insights, I can help you with that. I always help with premarital counseling, go through these with spouses. But here's some things that you learn about love languages. First one's affirming words. And here's what you'll find. The way you give love tends to be how you like to receive love. So you tend to give love in your love language. Now, if that's your spouse's love language, that's an easy match. Like, for instance, if you both have quality time, it doesn't matter if you're going to the movies or you're weeding the garden bed. You're doing it together, you're happy. You know, you've seen those couples, and then you've seen others where it might be affirming words or physical touch, and that does not mean sex. That's a guy's default love language. We have that on our scale, I guess. But physical touch, like hugs, holding hands, those kinds of things. Quality time, that means no phone. If your wife's value is quality time, you put the phone away and you just listen. Those kind of moments. Receiving gifts, and it doesn't have to be expensive gifts. She might be very practical. It's about the thought behind the gift. That's what they care about when receiving gifts. And then finally, acts of service. And so, like, it could be that you're trying to show love to your wife because acts of service is your love language. So you worked around the house, you cleaned the yard, you got everything ready. And if that's not her love language, she still doesn't feel loved. And feelings matter in this, okay? So you got to learn how to speak her love language and fill that love tank, because then she'll be more likely to fill your love tank and provide the things that you need as well. We have to be the one to start with that. So I'm going to invite you to do something. This is the first step in emotional connected to your wife. Go home. Now, first off, guess which one you think your wife's primary love language is. Go ahead and just mark it. This will give you a conversation to have with her in a minute. But think how she shows you love. Which one is her love language? If you've already gone through it, then that's probably easy. This can change over time. Sometimes it's a moving target, different seasons of life. There's different aspects. My wife's love language has changed over time. And I was like, man, I had that one figured out. Now I got to learn a new one, those kind of things. But just pick one for your wife. Go home and ask her. Go through the list with her, talk through them, and ask her which one does she think is her love language. And then ask her, what are some examples of meeting that love language for you? And take notes, or at least remember what you did, And whatever you guessed for a second, when was the last time you did that for your wife? If you think that's her love language, when was the last time you bought her a gift just because or something like that? These are those moments to realize, you know what? This is stuff you've got to continually be working at, or we move to separateness. And I've watched too many guys move apart from their wife. We focus on the kids and we focus on work or whatever it is. And you look up one day, you're strangers. And you're just in it together for the kids. And then they graduate or get around high school, and I've watched marriage after marriage fall apart at that point because they realize, I don't even like you. You know, I've had wives, the guy thought everything was great. And the wife, one day he comes home and she's like, I'm done. And he's completely blindsided. He doesn't see that they're not connected anymore. He just thought things were good because he's not causing any trouble and he's not pursuing the way he needs to. I've seen some of those guys step into stuff like this and repair the marriage to where it's healthy. It's a love relationship, but it takes a lot of work. We don't want to get that far before you start rebuilding. So there's nothing greater to a wife than to feel her husband's heart for her in tangible ways. Such moments are life-giving. These are the kind of things, this is the secret sauce, that if you just make a checklist of those things, especially once you know your wife's love language, put those things together. And if you just go down this list and do all of these over the next week or two, and don't wait and do one a week. Like, bombard her with one a day for a little while. You'll find which ones speak to her. That note might not mean anything to her, but then an act of service or taking her out on a date or some of these other things to initiate this, or a spiritual conversation, that's what she needs. And you're already initiating a spiritual conversation just by talking about love languages, okay? If you're not talking to your wife about better men, then that's another easy way to have those spiritual connections, to be like, hey, can I talk with you about what we're learning in Better Men? We were talking about work and how work was there before the fall. And I never realized that work, it was not a punishment. It's actually fulfillment. That's why I find so much fulfillment in work. And just have the conversation for a little bit. You're talking about spiritual things. She's going to love that. She's going to feel loved, feel connected to you as a result of this. So the next part of this is really built into that. She needs to see your faith. Again, we're moving into Ephesians. Husbands, keep your wives holy and blameless to the washing of the water with the word. So this is a call to spiritually initiate with your wife. You are the spiritual leader of your home. Notice I didn't say you should be. You are the spiritual leader of your home. If you're not, it's because you abdicated that role, but that doesn't change the fact that you're to be the spiritual leader. And if your wife is tired of carrying the weight of doing all the spiritual things, and there's freedom that comes from that. We'll see that in a minute when we show our faith to our wife. This is the spot where Adam failed. I'm just going to read through this because it's what we talked about in the past. Instead of confronting evil and protecting his wife with God's word, back in Genesis, he chose to become spiritually passive. Genesis 3:6, when the woman saw the tree was good, she ate of it, and she took from its fruit, and she gave also to her husband, and he ate. He was with her. And so that one moment when she needed him, he was passive. And because of that, it says Adam should have stepped up and shown his faith in this critical moment, but by not doing so, he brought hurt not only on himself, but his wife too. And so as sons of Adam, we're prone to the same spiritual passivity today. And when we go there with our wives, somebody eventually gets hurt. The life-giving husband rejects spiritual passivity. It means we're going to take ownership and act in ways needed to keep his marriage spiritually safe, sound, protected, and on track with eternity. So here's 3 practical ways to show this idea of faith with your wife. The first one is initiate times of spiritual togetherness with her. And the first one's probably the hardest for many of us, or the most foreign or awkward, and that is just to pray with her. Like, I don't know how to, she's better at this than me. She's better at the spiritual stuff than me. That's okay. We still need to step into that and see. So I want to give you some tips on what, I don't even know what to pray. Like if you said, can I pray with you tonight? What would you pray for in this? Oh, he killed a bug. Everybody's like, what was that? Okay, so a wasp? Yeah, especially kill those. Let's burn it later. Get them all out of here. So the idea of praying with her, what do I pray with my wife about? Or how should I pray? Well, here's just a simple way to pray. With your wife. Create a list of people that you care about and she cares about, and then pray for them. Just pray for God's blessing on them. Pray for God to work in their life. And what she's going to see is he's praying for the things that are important to us. And she feels connected through that. She feels affirmed. And all you're doing is just praying for people that you know you should be praying for anyway. Engage in spiritual conversation. Again, talk about some Better Man stuff. I've watched guys, just the marriage, just by coming home every week and talking about this stuff, has caused the wife to feel spiritually connected to them in a way. And I know some of us have been having those conversations, some of us haven't. This is an easy way to come home and go, hey, here's what we learned about tonight. Or tonight, especially, to go through those love languages with your wife and figure those out. I promise it pays dividends. First, she'll learn her love language. Second, she'll feel connected to you as a result of that. Share with her your spiritual experiences. Talk about these things. What is God showing you? Maybe that you start with her, and then instead of sitting her down and saying, I want to share with you my spiritual experience, I'm simply saying you engage with her. What's God been showing you lately? And listen, phone down. Just, here's something I learned this week at Better Man. Those kind of moments. And it's going to be awkward at first praying with your wife if you haven't been doing it. But it's necessary if we want to stay spiritually connected. And I promise you, it says wives who attend church with their husbands on a weekly basis are happier in their marriages than other women. I mean, it's just simple. When they study this, that's what we find. It says also to encourage involvement together at church, maybe find a way to serve together. Especially if quality time is her thing, then just do it together. It's amazing what that can do to a relationship. The next part of this is let me go back. It's just more building off of this. Uphold biblical values in a number of practical areas. And so you see like keeping your word, resolving conflict, time with family. You talk through these values with your wife. You protect her with these convictions. You refuse to let those convictions go even when life gets hard and challenging. That means you keep the standard. You're at home and you say to your kids, hey, we're not going to treat each other like that. You're not going to talk to your mother this way. We're not going to treat each other. We're going to keep our word. You said you were going to do this. We're not going to make an excuse. We're going to keep our word. These are the kind of times where we get to do this with them. And then finally, build friendships with other godly men. Your wife feels encouraged and reassured by this. The fact that you're going to this for some of your wives means a lot because you're putting in some time you're showing that you're being here, and they don't always know how to encourage you and honor you in that, but they're feeling supported as a result of you being a part of things like this. All right, so the next part of this, and we go back to what we're trying to do, she needs to feel your heart, she needs to see your faith, and finally, she needs the freedom to choose. This is talking about finances for a second. And it's not going to say that I'm not saying that every woman needs to stay at home. My wife works out of the home. We've had that conversation. It's important to have the conversation, though, and that's what we'll get to. But Ephesians 5:28-29, husbands, provide and care for your wives. You have a responsibility to provide. There's nothing wrong with your dreams. But once you're married and, that idea of being a baton twirler in the circus that dream has died, you need to get a job and provide for your family in those moments. There's nothing wrong with pursuing your passions, but at some point, and I was never passionate about that. That was not me. But whatever that is, we learned that we need to step up, and it's a call to financially liberate your wife. It's been a good season. The 21st century, the note says, it's been an amazing time for women. Everywhere, women are experiencing new opportunities, new freedoms, and new breakthroughs. The number of wives working outside the home has increased dramatically. Women are doing amazing things, but the irony is that with these advances has come a marked decrease in the happiness women feel about their lives. Look on that next page. It says, according to a general social survey, every year since 1972, women's reported happiness has declined. And they said why, and they think much of it has to do with the woman's struggle to balance work with children and home. That pull between work and home decreases satisfaction. And that's where husbands are the difference makers when it comes to a wife's life balance. Let me see where I'm going to get to those things. So right here it says the husband who can financially support his wife, at least a basic living level, provides his wife with expanded living options. I'm not going to get into this, but she no longer has to work full time. Here's the thing. If your wife wants to work outside the home, that's great. But if she feels like she has to, and you've never had that conversation, she may resent you over that. She will resent you that she has to work, even though she wants to work outside the home. Now, how do you fix that? You have a conversation. You talk about it. There was this one guy, he was in a pretty wealthy field, but his wife was a doctor. And he went home after this kind of session, and he asked her, would you like to stay home? Yeah, especially when kids are young. He talks about that in here. When children are at home, that's those crucial times. And he asked his wife, would you like to stay home? And she said, let me think about that. He got real nervous. He said, how long do you need to think about this? I thought this was going to be a done deal. And a few days later, she came back to him and she said, you know what? I know I'm supposed to be a doctor. I'm called to this. I love doing this. But the fact that you just asked me about it means so much to me. That's the difference, okay? The difference is the mindset. She's resenting that she has to work, but at the same time, you tell her if you want to stay home, you can, and she chooses to stay outside the home and work, then she feels fulfilled in that. And I don't know exactly how to explain that. I know that's worked in my life. That was something that we went through. There was a season when the kids were really small. She stayed at home. But she's not going to be staying at home all the time. Like, she wants to get out. She wants to put on real clothes and go out and be a professional. That's my wife. But we had to have the conversation because there was resentment until I went through this and learned to have that conversation with her through this. So according to Pew Research in 2012, 67% of mothers said their ideal was part-time work or no work outside the home. It's a question of how are you partnering with her? If she has to work full-time, how are you compensating at home? You know, some of us like to say, well, I'm old school. The wife takes care of the home. That's the woman's job. Well, the woman's job used to not be outside the home working full-time just like you did. So are you doing anything to fill in that gap, or she's still got to take care of all the home stuff and work? Because we're expecting her to do that all on her own. We need to step up in those moments. And just having that conversation to figure out, what does that look like to share the responsibilities? And to be man enough to not let that emasculate us, but like either provide to where she doesn't have to work, or provide so that she can choose to work outside the home, but also partner with her and figure out how to handle those things in the house, because she feels that tension all the time. She's always feeling that tension in her life through this. There's a weight to carrying some of this on your wife. And especially if you have the wife that's different on vacation. Like when you go on vacation, she's like a different woman. And they've done studies and they talk to women about this. They're free. They don't have all those responsibilities that's weighing them down from work and home. They just get to enjoy vacation. When you get to the right balance, you get to see more of that woman on a daily basis. She feels free. There's a weight lifted. She's happier. She's much more engaged with you and what you're doing as well. So, all right. So, wives today long for husbands who will financially free them up. That's the last statement in that. So let's just get to the summary real quick out of this. The life-giving husband, in summary: as an emotional connector, his wife feels loved. Notice it's feels, okay? It's all about feels today. As a spiritual initiator, his wife feels protected. And as a financial liberator, his wife feels free. And so there's a quote here from Allie Stuckey. Here's a secret every woman knows. Women want real men. Men they can count on and look up to. I don't know any woman at any age who is attracted to a passive man who looks to her to be his protector, provider, and leader. Every woman wants a strong, responsible man. And when you're looking at this list, you might think, man, I've got this part down pat. But there's other areas that maybe you're lacking in. This is the time to step up, especially that spiritual role in our house. I've talked to some guys who have asked their wife, what does it look like to be the spiritual leader of the home since we started this? And it was mind-blowing what they said, because it was not what they were expecting, which is exactly what we said would happen, because we don't understand the mind of a woman sometimes. But now she feels spiritually protected as a result of that. She feels connected to him emotionally as a result of that. So we won't always get it right. We won't always get this perfect. But what our wife wants is to see a man who is putting in the work to know her and trying to be a better man. And that's what they're looking for. That's what they're needing. That's what we need to be.